Welcome, Epic Understanding family. I am pleased to have with you or with us today, Miss Katha D. Blackwell, Vice President of Shelter Services and Support Housing. Welcome.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you so much.
It's wonderful to bring you to my audience. Tell us what you do there at Shelter Service and Support Housing.
Well, it's with Partnership Against Domestic Violence, and what I do is I lead our emergency shelters as well as our supportive housing department. We have two domestic violence shelters where we serve over 500 clients per year who are fleeing domestic violence. That's men, women, children, you name it. We are there to help and serve them. And at that shelter, they get to stay up to 90 days, sometimes longer, depending on their situation. And we also provide them with housing services throughout the duration of their lease. If they decide that they want to move forward with their life and get their own place, we're there to support them financially and get them what they need.
That is excellent. And I noticed that you mentioned men. So men are not excluded from the abuse cycle, correct?
That's correct. Men are not excluded at all. They too experience domestic violence. It's a small percentage, however, men do experience domestic violence just like women do.
Okay, that is excellent. Let us just kind of break down the different types of abuse that you might find in the abuse spectrum. Now, we're not going to be able to get to them all, but there are like four buckets where people fall into. So let's talk about one of the most common. What does that look like?
One of the most common domestic violence relationships entails where a man will be abusive towards a woman. And we know that that can be good, that can go both ways. However, the majority of domestic violence cases entails a man being physically abusive, verbally abusive, psychologically abusive, or financially abusive towards a woman. And when it comes to those different types of abuse, with physical, of course, it has to do with, it could be punches, kicks, pushing, shoving, a variety pack of physical abuse that can take place when it comes to that type of domestic violence. And then you have verbal abuse where there may be name calling or belittling or a variety pack of different things when it comes to verbal abuse, yelling and screaming. When it comes to psychological abuse, that's where he may not be physically or verbally abusive, but he's psychologically making you think that you're crazy, where he may move stuff around and like you may have put your keys in one place and next thing you know, your keys are in a totally different place and you know that you did not move those keys. That's a form of psychological abuse where things are just, he's making you think that you're crazy when in actuality, that's not the case. And then of course you have financial abuse where the abuser is controlling all of the money, where you don't have any say whatsoever. Even if you are working, you have no authority over the funding or the money that you're bringing into the home at all. And so that's where financial abuse comes in, where you're asking, can I have some money to go grocery shopping? Can I have some money to take care of the kids? That's a form of control in regards to financial abuse. So those four variety packs included in domestic violence in itself. But the majority of violence that you'll see, even in the news, is normally where a man is abusing a woman.
You know, my friends over at Narc Free Living love to talk about psychological abuse just because it's so subtle and it makes you feel like you're crazy.
Absolutely. It really does. It's one of those things where you're second guessing yourself more often than not, where you know yourself, but then you start questioning, maybe I did intend to do X, Y, and Z, whatever the abuser may have said you were trying to do. Or they try to twist your words around or try to manipulate situations, or they'll make you think that your family and friends don't care about you. And they'll say little negative things. Yeah, they'll say little things to you that make you think, oh, this person that's your best friend, she doesn't care about you. If anything, she's jealous of you. And so there's little bitty seeds of negativity that get sown when it comes to that psychological abuse, which makes you question, man, maybe he's right, or maybe I did forget to do what I said I was going to do. It's all mind games, and it's really sad, but that's how it is. That's psychological abuse.
Now, the reality is, just because you're being physically abused does not mean you're not also being psychologically abused and financially abused. It might all come in one nice abuse package.
That's true. That's true. I know there are some people who may think, well, he's not punching me, or, he's not kicking me, so I'm not in an abusive relationship. It's not always going to be physical. It could, like I said before, it could be verbal, psychological, or financially controlling your finances. It's own little it's boiling pot of mess, I call it,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
where you're going through so many different things. You're completely in an unhealthy relationship, and that part of power and control, which is one thing that abusers, that's the main goal of abusers. They're trying to use power and control to control this relationship, to control you. And so it's always some mixed up conglomerate of all those things. Yeah.
So let's talk about this, this idea of abuse, and you have this all in this nice little package, but how come some people think it's normal?
That's such a good question. I believe that there's times where people believe that this is normal because of what they see in social media,
Okay.
or what they see in television shows. They may see someone who is a couple that's completely, they are in an abusive relationship where the husband may be talking some real negative towards his wife. And because this is something we may see on a regular basis, we start to think, oh, this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to domestic violence, especially for abusers, we normally say that this is a learned behavior. You learned this
Mm-hmm.
behavior somewhere. You had to have seen this behavior somewhere to think that this is acceptable in regards to how you treat someone. And it really comes down to what we see, and what we're surrounded by exemplifies that abusive relationships are okay. That it's okay for someone who says they love you one second to belittle you the next. When back in the day when I was growing up, we had really healthy Black shows that showed you what a healthy relationship looked like between a husband and a wife. And today we really don't have that good example. If you don't have that good example in your own home, then normally what you'll do is you'll lean towards what you see on television, what you see with celebrities, as being the
Mm-hmm.
example of what a relationship is. And so you may hear people who will say, well, such and such cheated on his wife, that's just, or an abuser may say that he cheated on his wife, and it's no big deal, it's no problem. This is what everybody's doing. And it's like, no, this is not okay. It's not okay to belittle someone you say you love. It's not okay to put your hands on anyone. That is not the norm of a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, do you think cheating is abuse?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's psychological abuse. Absolutely.
Okay.
Because on one hand, it's like you say you love someone, cheating is a choice, just like abuse, it's a choice. No one's
Mm-hmm.
making you do that. And it's really comes down to where, if you're owning your stuff, like for instance, if you have a spouse who's cheated on you and they're
Mm-hmm.
not owning their mess, they're trying to blame you for what they
Uh-huh.
did, saying, if you would have just looked better, if you would have just cooked for me more, if you would have just paid more attention to me, this would have never happened. That's when we're going down the route of abuse and manipulation, when they're not
Okay.
owning their own actions. But if you have someone who slips up, they make a mistake, they make a bad choice, and then they own their mess and they say, hey, you know what? I messed up. I did not make a good choice. I'm gonna do my job to fix this, or fix myself, and not blame you. Then that's not, that itself is not abusive. But when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to where your actions, you're making excuses for the actions that you've done to justify your actions, that's when it's a problem. Yeah.
So wait, first, do you think there's a such thing as an abuse cycle?
Oh, absolutely. 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 There is. an abusive cycle, like we call it the abuse cycle. Yeah, that's exactly what it's called. I'm not going to add any words to it. It is the abuse cycle, where you have a violent act takes place, whether it's verbal, psychological, or what have you. Then the
Mm-hmm.
abuser comes back around and they go into this thing called the honeymoon phase, where they're saying, I'm sorry, they're bringing flowers, and I got flowers today. He's really sorry. He cooked dinner, he cleaned the house. And then it goes into a situation where we call it the walking on eggshells phase, where you can tell that something bad's about to happen and you feel the tension in the air. It's almost like when you know it's going to rain. You can tell that the
Okay.
clouds are getting darker. You hear that there's no birds chirping. You know that something is coming. There's a storm coming. It's the same thing in an abusive relationship during that cycle of abuse, where you can feel tension in the air. You're not being as vocal as you were before, because you don't want an argument to come out. And then next thing you know, there's a violent act that takes place again, and it just keeps going in a circle, where we
Mm-hmm.
go through the honeymoon phase, we walk on eggshells, then there's a violent act, and it just continues.
So I would say that is very traditional, your traditional description um, of abuse. And you know what? I would be remiss if I didn't point out that so many times we have this idea of a long lasting relationship, but nobody really talks about how grandma was getting her butt beat
Right.
until granddaddy ran out of testosterone.
Exactly.
We was married for 50 years and 40 of them he beat me.
Exactly. No one really talks about that. And I think that is, for me, I believe that's how generational curses continue. It's so
Mhm.
important that we shine a light on what's happened in your family history, because this
Mhm.
didn't just come out of nowhere. This had to have been somewhere along the way in the journey. Maybe it was an auntie or a cousin or somebody has gone through this. It just doesn't pop up out of nowhere. And so I'm all for people being transparent and honest when it comes to their own history of what they've experienced. So you can teach and gain knowledge to teach the next generation. So history doesn't have to continue to repeat itself.
Mhm.
There's times when we've seen clients who were in our shelter as children come back as adults.
You're kidding me.
It's so true. It's so real, and it's statistics show that a girl who was raised up in an abusive household is 5 times more likely to become a victim of abuse herself as an adult. And for boys, it's a similar statistic. For those who see abuse growing up, they're 3 times more likely to be abusers when they grow up. So it's a cycle that continues throughout generations until somebody puts a stop to it and realizes this doesn't have to be my story.
Mhm.
I don't have to repeat history, because these actions, these are choices. These are
Mhm.
choices, and I do not have to repeat history.
Wow. So I would say that's very traditional. That is the traditional type of abuse. That's the one that I think movies are made of, so to
Yes.
speak. What I don't think is that people talk about is the subtle differences in abuse, where you have somebody who has like an abuse tendency, but at the same time another party has, not that there's ever a reason that anybody should hit anyone, I want that to be known, but there is a provoker, so
Mm.
to speak. And the other day, you and I were talking, and I described what I know to be a real life situation, because I was discussing it. It's a past situation that happened with one of my students, and she didn't, when I asked her, why didn't you call the police? And she was like, I started it, I. And true enough, she was kind of clowning. So I'll describe what I said to you. The young lady, she came in the home, everything was a mess and she was irritated. She came in cussing and fussing. He was laying on the couch, had not did anything all day. Her baby was wet. The kitchen, the kitchen was dirty, and everything was a mess. And she came in hot. She walked over and pop right upside the head and
Oh,
started cursing and fussing. So she's in the kitchen now. She's cooking and washing the dishes after being at work all
Mm,
day long. He pops off and gets his keys to leave.
right.
What does she do? She stands in front of him.
Mm, mm,
She
mm,
she stands in front of him. She got her finger all up in his face and whatnot, and he draws back and
mm,
hits
mm.
her. Mm-hmm.
See, no one wants to be in an abusive relationship, but
Mm-hmm.
we always have to own our own actions. We have to always look at what role did I play in this situation? Because at the end of the day, I had a choice. We all have choices.
Okay.
But
Mm-hmm.
in that particular situation, she had a choice. Even coming home and seeing this mess, it
Mm-hmm.
was a choice for her to go and pop him upside his head. That was a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Now that does not mean that it's okay for him to go back, toe to toe with fighting with her. But at the same time, it's a choice, and our
Mm-hmm.
actions do have consequences. They do have consequences. So even in situations like that, we have to think about. No one wants this violence in their home. I don't think anybody wants violence in their
Mm-hmm.
but we have to figure out and practice a different way of responding when it comes to situations like that because everybody's going to get frustrated. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to get frustrated. You're going to come home, the house is going to be a mess, vice versa, either way. But we still have to figure out a way. How do we go about responding when situations like this come about? Because putting our hands on somebody is not the way. That's how people end up in jail. That's how people end up dead. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's such a real acknowledgement to how we have to think about, even if I feel like putting my hands on somebody, even if I feel like I need to, I have to rethink. We have to rethink what we do in our actions. So I've heard of situations like that where you'll have couples that this is how they fight. They don't
Right.
know any other way.
Mm-hmm.
This is what they do. They will go toe to toe, throwing blows. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna let him put his hands on me. I'm a fight back and punching back, which is definitely defend yourself. However, it should not be the norm where this is how our relationship is. When we get into arguments, we can't talk it out. We have to
Mm-hmm.
go blow to blow. And the same thing even with verbal abuse. We can't have a civil conversation. We have to yell and scream and go off and cuss each other out before we can get to. No, it doesn't have to be the norm for you. It doesn't have to be the norm for your relationship. People have to
Now,
learn how to do
Katha,
things differently. Mhm.
I'm going to tell you, people cursing one another out these days, like 40 going north. I mean, it's
Mm,
just the way it is. I said these people just came out of the pandemic fighting, but really they were
mm.
fighting before.
Yes, yes, that is so true. And look, when the pandemic hit, the crisis line came to a screeching halt for a moment, like probably
Okay.
for a month. We have at our agency we have like a 24-hour crisis line. There's DV agencies across the nation that have that 24-hour crisis line. But when
Okay.
April came up, April it was like everybody and their mama calling because some people didn't realize they were sleeping with the devil until they had to stay home with him. And so
Wow. Yeah.
violence just ensued to all kind of levels. And even the World Health Organization claimed that domestic violence has become an epidemic during the pandemic. And so it's been such a wild time, but it's like this relationship was already unhealthy, but people weren't really
Mm-hmm.
focusing in on how unhealthy it was until they had to stay home. I've heard of so many people getting divorces over this past year because they didn't realize they were so busy doing other things that they weren't paying attention to how messed up this relationship really is. And so it's really sad that there's so many people who are in these abusive relationships and they don't recognize it because it's become the norm and they become used to being in this relationship. And it took a pandemic to wake people up like, hey, we got to get out of this. This relationship is not healthy. It's time to go.
So one thing I want to underline is that healthy is better than longevity.
Yes, that is so true. There are so many people that don't realize like a relationship is like a job.
Okay.
A relationship is like having a job. You have to put the work in. You have to put the time in. And no one wants to be at a job that they hate. No one wants to be in a relationship that is completely emotionally draining. And so it's it's better for you to be by yourself than to be in a relationship that is literally killing you on the inside. There's so many there's so many people we see who are on so much medication for depression, anxiety, stress, overweight, obese. I mean, there's so many things that are going on. It's like when you're stressed, this relationship that you're in is stressing you out, your body is feeling that. Your body is feeling that. And I don't know how long you would be able to last in this relationship with it being unhealthy, because even if you do have, somebody warm in your bed, this person is causing you grief, anxiety, abusing your emotions, abusing you physically, verbally, and just tearing you down. If this person isn't building you up, then you're pretty much you almost like you're sleeping with death. I would call it. It's almost like you're sleeping with death, because it's such a drain on you emotionally that it's not worth it. And I've had people, I've spoken with women who will say, I'd rather be in an abusive relationship than be alone. They are so afraid of being lonely, and thinking that, this is it for me. There's no other life or opportunity. There's no other relationship that I could possibly have. This is it for me. And I'd rather just stick and stay in this versus going out and seeing that there's better things on the other side. I've seen women who have been in the worst abusive relationships who leave, and now they're healthy, they're running businesses, they've come to the other side and realized, what I had didn't have to be my reality. And sometimes people get stuck there.
I'm going to call us out. I'm going to call us out of just about the social pressure there is to being in a relationship. People act like you're a pariah.
Yes.
If you're not in a relationship. And then if you're not in a relationship and they think you're good, then they're always trying to fix you up.
That's true. That's true. That is so true. I don't think people realize how important it is to be content with yourself. There's so many women I see all the time where you are going into one relationship after the next, never knowing what it's like to be by yourself for a while. It's okay to be single for the moment. It's okay to be content with taking yourself out on a date. Take yourself to the movies. I don't know if people are afraid to do stuff by themselves. It's okay to go out to eat. It's okay to go on a trip by yourself. Enjoy being alone or going with friends, but you don't have to be pushed into this relationship. Or there are times when people stay in a relationship because their family expects them to, or culturally, it's frowned upon for you to leave your spouse.
So I want you, because I can't think of any. Can you name me any show where a person or a woman particularly is happily single? And that's what the show is about.
That's a good question.
I'll wait. I can't think of none. Family out there, can anybody think of a show for me where somebody is happily single?
No, I can't think of not a one. Not a one. There's always a pursuit of a relationship or a pursuit of a man. There's always something like that in the show. I cannot think of one. I would be surprised if there is one. I would be really surprised if there is one. But that's our society. Our society. It's frowned upon for women to be single. It's frowned upon for them to be happy and single. There's always a push.
There is just wait a minute, beautifully rooted, yes, said none. And I can't think of any either, but people do not tell that story. I would like to see a show that said happily single.
That would be amazing. I've known of, I can't think of her name, but there's an author I know of that who's been single for a very long time, and she's happy. She shares it on social media. I can't think of her name for the life of me, but she's happily single. But she's content with herself. She is fulfilled. She's educated. She's fulfilled within herself, and her faith in God has helped her along the way. So it's she's content. And I've even told people, when you get out of a relationship, be okay being single for a while. Allow
Hmm.
yourself time to heal before
Is
you
there a
jump
class for
in.
that?
There needs to be. There needs to be. Like, be content. It's okay to pause for a moment, because let's, it's almost like if you get hurt or you get wounded and you put a band-aid on top, right? Because you need some time to heal. Well, there's some people that are not even allowing themselves time to heal. They're just ripping it off and going right back to doing what got them hurt in the first place. Give yourself time to heal. Allow yourself to reflect on, what did we learn from this relationship? How do we not repeat ourselves getting back into the same thing over and over again? Because that is real, where you'll find women who have never been in a healthy relationship ever in life and have found themselves in multiple abusive relationships. I encourage them, give yourself some time to heal. It's okay to be alone right now. Give yourself a goal of maybe 6 months, even just to pause and enjoy yourself.
Well, I want to just step that up. I want to level that up. How about I'm not broken because I'm single. I'm single because I'm single.
Hey, that's even better. It's so
I'm
simple.
single because I want to be single. I'm not broken. I'm not hurt. I'm fine. I'm good. I like it.
Mhm. And our society does not, like we talked about just now. I mean, it doesn't support people being by themselves. There is an assumption that something's wrong. Well, why don't you have kids yet? Or why are you still single? Do you not want to date anyone? Maybe some people are just content. They're happy. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not that they don't have friends or unhealthy family that shines love on them all the time. That's one of the biggest things I've seen in this work, is that survivors or women who don't have a solid family unit are the ones who quickly get into these relationships that are unhealthy, because they don't
Mm-hmm.
have that support system around them, their family. There are singles out there who have that family support, who have that healthy group of friends, and they're fine. It's not that they're broken. It's not that they
Mm-hmm.
don't hope someday to get into a relationship, but they're fine. They're content and they're happy right now. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. You want to know something? There, there is a hunt for significance inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, we have to have someone to reflect that back at us.
Yes. Yes, I believe that. I believe that wholeheartedly. Most people find it in their faith based. But if they believe in God, that's where they find their strength and their reflection of who they want to be and who they aim to be in life. And then they have those friends, those siblings, those family members who shine that example of hope. I think that's the biggest thing for anyone. If you have one person who's an example of hope for you, that's a good thing. I know for me, I grew up watching. I know some people don't like to talk about certain shows, but back in the 80s and 90s, there was a very popular show with a black cast. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
show I watched. I watched that show. I watched multiple black shows, but that was the example of
Mm-hmm.
healthiness. That was the example of, hey, one day I can have this healthy relationship, because you can see it. You have someone in your life, or you have seen something on television in your life that shows this is what healthy looks like. That's what I want for myself and my family.
Mm-hmm. I want to highlight this. My girl over at North Free Linen Living, Shannon, she said that she had family support, but she still ended up with a psychopath for a husband.
Mm. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. See, and that's rare. That's one of those rare times where it's like, wow, how did this happen? A lot of times it's because there's little red flags in abusive relationships where we don't see it up front. And it's not that It's not that there's a lack of knowledge, or we just didn't, or we're blind to it. Is that we just didn't recognize the signs. And it always starts off subtle, where there's little subtle things that take place. It's real subtle. Like all of a sudden you can't order food for yourself at a restaurant. It's subtle. It's like, oh, he just wants to order for me. Nah, it's a little bit of power and control there. And it's important that those things get checked early on, and those boundaries are set early on in that relationship. So there's always little small things where it's like, well, he started off trying to control the money. It's little subtle things. Or maybe during an argument, he shoved you a little bit. It was a shove. I think every person has their boundary of their tolerance of violence, per se. It should be zero. It should be zero tolerance. But when it comes to violent relationships, everyone has their level of tolerance level, where it's like, oh, he shoved me, but he didn't punch me, or he punched me, but he didn't try to stab me or do any of those different things. So it starts off real subtle, but over time it gradually increases to where now you sleeping with somebody who's completely out of their mind, but they were really just putting on a face at the beginning of the relationship, like people do at their jobs. They'll put on a face, they'll come to work on time, do everything they're supposed to do. But as they get comfortable with you, they'll continuously try to push that level a little bit further to see how far they can go. And that's why it's so important in your relationships that you set those boundaries early. If you don't like something, you better say something. If you want to know something, you better say something.
I think it's more important to set boundaries for ourselves, for ourselves, meaning that if I see this, I go no further. That's
Absolutely.
It's a wrap.
It's a wrap. And that is so key to any healthy relationship. You have to let people know when they've crossed that boundary, when it's been crossed, and then set the tone early. You don't even have to wait till they cross it. You can set the tone early, so that way they know what they're working with. They can either come up to your standards of expectation or they won't. But at least you gave them the opportunity to know, this is what I expect. I'm not going to tolerate violence in my relationship. I'm not going to tolerate people yelling and screaming at me. You're not going to control my money. It's going to be a mutual relationship. You're going to control my money. And I'm not going to endure psychological abuse. You have to say, and these are things you shouldn't have to say.
You know what? I was really thinking the same thing. I will not be telling anybody that you don't put your hands on me. The first time I think, man, I'm running for the hills.
Because, right.
Listen, I got bought sense. Bought sense is the kind that you pay with, time, energy, effort, your skin. And so I've already been there, done that. I don't need to figure it out anymore. I'm not. Tell you don't hit me, girl, please. I'm running for the hills. Do like this.
You flesh. I'm not. You shouldn't even have to say, you should not even have to say these things, right? But the thing is, when we get into these relationships, we don't know that person's past or their history. We don't know what their upbringing was like. We may get a glimpse of it when we go visit the family, but in real details, we don't know what is going on in that background or what's going on in that mind. So even if there's a hint of something that don't feel right in your gut, in your spirit, when you feel like something's not right, follow that inkling and say something. Don't feel like, oh, I don't want him to think that, I'm picky, or I don't like this because I really like him and I want him to like me. It's so important that you're transparent and you are letting him know, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'll never forget. I grew up in a loud family. I'll never forget the first time my husband was like, hey, you're yelling at me, because we're loud in my family.
Okay.
And when we get upset, we get upset. And so I'll never forget, like, that first year of marriage with my husband. He was like, hey, you yelling at me. And he was like, he's not used to that. His family's very calm, they're calm people. And so it's like, if you don't say anything, if he never said anything, I'd be still going out loud. poor guy. Still,
Oh
just we
man.
probably wouldn't be together anymore. But because I set boundaries with him, he set boundaries with me. It's like this is what I expect. Let's be respectful of each other. It's a mutual respect. Because when you love somebody, you're gonna respect them, but you should also expect the same in return because you love yourself
Mm-hmm.
first. You love you. So it's
Yes.
so important that is the foundation of your relationship is that mutual respect. It's not just one-sided where he gets to do whatever he wants. He can, cross your boundaries all the time and you can't ever, no. It's mutual respect. And it's so important that level of communication is there early on. So I encourage people, don't be afraid to speak up and say, hey, I don't like that. When you do X, Y, and Z, I don't like it. That person is either going to respect you or they're going to cross your boundary. And if they cross your boundary, it's time to go.
So I think that we have to. So one, you probably were not yelling at him with hostility. You were yelling. You were talking loud, making a point, and those are two different things.
That's true.
Okay.
That's true. It wasn't to the point of, oh, I'm yelling at you because, calling him out his name, but the simple fact that this is offensive in a way to him. So
Mm-hmm.
if I want to be respectful, let me figure this out. Let me so I'm still a little loud, but let me tone it down a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's a mutual level of respect. And that's another thing when it comes to healthy relationships. It should not be that it's only one person who's changing or compromising all the time. No, it should be mutual compromise. If you don't like something and I tell you, it's respectful. If you tell me that you don't like something and you feel a certain kind of way, it's respect in return. It's mutual. It's a level of mutual respect.
I definitely agree with that. I want to back up just a little bit because you said something and it was so subtle. It's something we tell ourselves. It's something that we say to ourselves, particularly when we're young and idealistic. And it is this: I like this guy and I really want him to like me.
Mm-hmm.
And he can, if he would just stop doing da 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 da. Okay. So this man has this long list of everything you like, but
Mm,
he is doing something toxic.
mm, mm,
That
mm.
one thing, because you want him to like you, it's like we almost start to morph. We all
Yeah.
we compromise.
Compromise way more than they will, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's such a real thing. It's like, man, he's got all those bells and whistles, but this one toxic issue, how do I and we ignore it, like, oh, maybe it'll get better. That's the
Mm-hmm.
one thing that we see when it comes to survivors of domestic violence who come to our shelter. It's not that they wanted that relationship to end. They wanted the abuse to stop. They wanted the
Mm-hmm.
abuse to stop. It's like, it's not that they weren't even thinking about ending the relationship. They were just like, if someone could get him to stop putting his hands on me, because we were good until the abuse came into play. And
Right.
so it's like, when that happens, there's sometimes where you just gotta, this relationship is not going to work. And then there's times where people feel like, well, I need to change. Let me fix this. When it comes to relationships, the way you're treated, the way someone treats you in a relationship, that's a choice. The way an abuser treats you is a choice. Your husband, boyfriend, whoever it may be, they're choosing to treat you that way. And there's nothing that you can do outside of leaving to fix that situation because
Now,
that abuse is a choice.
yes. Let's talk about a strange phenomena. A strange phenomena because a man will abuse one woman and won't abuse another.
Oh, that is a
Okay.
whole world. Yes.
Yes, girl. What comes to mind? What comes to mind is the color purple.
Yep. Yep. That's right.
Mhm.
That is so
Mister
true.
Mister was beating the crap out of Miss Silly, but
Yes,
he
he
was
was.
serving Suge breakfast. What's up with that? What is going on?
It's I've told so many people, it's really those boundaries. It's really establishing those boundaries because even though abuse is a choice, people are going to treat you the way you allow them to treat you. If you allow someone to talk to you some any kind of way, that's what they will do. If you don't stand up for yourself or don't speak up, say something, or present this level of, I'm not going to just take anything from you. Not to say that people aren't already doing that, but you have to set the standard of who you are and what you expect in a relationship. That's why it's so important to communicate early on and let it be known, this is what I'm expecting. This is what I'm not that, like people say, I'm not that girl. Don't be that one, because you don't have to take this. You do not have to take this. So it's very important. He's going to treat you how you allow him to treat you. If it is allowed that he can talk to you some any kind of way, tear you down in front of your friends, or text you, like we talked about this before, it's okay for him to text you 50 times in 1 hour because he say he miss you. No, that's not cute. That's not cute.
No.
We are grown. There's boundaries. And if he can't trust you to be out, then this isn't the healthy relationship. And so whatever he thinks he can get away with, he'll do. And I mean, women do the same thing. If I can get away with it, then yeah, I'm gonna do whatever. Come on. Yeah.
Why not do it? Wait a minute. I want to check this. Okay, so Shannon over at Narc Free Living, she's actually an expert in narcissism and things of that nature. And so she made a great point. Check this out. He still abuses in other ways, emotional, psychological abuse. Because the fact that he had a whole wife and was dating Suge, how about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's emotionally abusive in itself, because he said, telling Suge, I love you, but she can see that he's abusive to his wife. She has befriended his wife. So it's like, that's emotional in itself. And she knew that. I think she knew that movie is such a good example.
That is amazing. Wait a minute. I'm going to tell you, though, this is why people, you're not supposed to just stay together forever, because when Suge bought her man, her brand new husband,
he looked so heartbroken. She was never gonna stay with you. Okay, no.
Wow. I'm like, oh my God, y'all killing me. Y'all killing me with this. But why was Suge and Celie? I'm sorry. Why was Mr. and Celie jealous?
Yeah, that was a whole thing. It messed up their dynamic. It messed up their dynamic, because I noticed in that movie that Mr. was he was happier when Suge was around.
Yes.
He wasn't as abusive when Suge was around. So maybe Celie saw her as an out for her own self.
Yes. So I like talking about this movie in this particular sense, because you can experience some joy in some normality, and even find comfort in this abusive situation. It still doesn't mean it's healthy.
It still does not. And that's where that cycle of abuse that we talked about, where there'll be moments of this beautiful picture of this perfect, quote unquote, perfect family. But there's this layer of abuse that's going on, and it hasn't come to the point where it outweighs what they have. So you'll have that's one of the biggest things that causes people to stay, more so than anything else. They have this lifestyle that they've been trying to achieve, this marriage, these children, this house, this home. They've been trying to achieve this, but this abuse keeps popping up, and the abuse has not yet outweighed what they would lose if they leave this relationship. It's the stuff that keeps people. It's the stuff, that house, that home, those children, it's the stuff. And so until it gets to that point, like I've said before, until it gets to that point where it has completely crossed her boundary of her boundary of abuse, then she'll leave. Like I've met people who, the man set you on fire and you thinking about going back a week later. What is going on here? But it wasn't until he tried to touch the children, that's when she was like, okay, now I'm leaving. Because the abuser hadn't reached her level of tolerance in regards to abuse. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why sometimes you'll have people still in the mess, but then they'll have those glimpses of a quote unquote paradise because it has the picture of healthiness, but it's really a hot mess when the kids go to bed and they close the doors at night and behind in that bedroom there's a whole lot of mess going on.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
So how come people sometimes feel like abuse is love? And I'm gonna give you an example,
Mm.
and I've heard this story more than once, where somebody might have actually shot another person because of their activity,
Mm-hmm.
and they bet not say nothing. They even went to the hospital, got healed up. Who shot you? I don't know. I know of a particular situation where a woman shot her husband in the butt. He was
Mm.
clowning. She shot him in the butt. And he would not say anything against his wife. Period. End of story. They died together in their 80s.
Mm.
You
Mm-mm.
know, and it is a family friend story, and she talks about that story with such delight and glow, and just like, we don't get divorced in my family, we don't do that, but that's her idea.
Mm.
That's what love looks like. That's what standing by your man looks like. That's what staying together, no matter what, for better or worse. That's what it looks like.
Mm. It's I think it is a cultural or societal norm, especially back in the day. Like, for instance, you'll
Mm-hmm.
have people who will say, "Oh, all men do this. All men
Mm.
are abusive.
Mm-hmm.
All men cheat. They all do this." And for some people, that became their reality, where this is life. This is what
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother said. This is what my auntie said. This is what they said. This is how they said that. This is how it is. So don't be surprised when it happens. Stand with your man. Stand, no. But that if it's like a societal norm. But just because
Right.
society says something's okay, I mean, literally on the books there used to be a law that was called the rule of thumb, where you could beat your wife as long as the stick isn't thicker than your thumb. Just because
That was
society
true.
says something is right doesn't say, just because they say it's okay doesn't make it right. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think for people, they have thought to themselves, that my family and the culture has said, I'm going to stand together, because they feel like if they leave that relationship, then they failed.
Right.
But you really saved your life. No one sees
But
that
you
part. You
failed.
really saved yourself. Like, this is not living. Like, people, there are literally people out there that will kill themselves, kill their spouse and everyone who's in an abusive relationship. The abuser will kill everybody, including himself, all because this relationship is falling apart and they're no
Mm-hmm.
longer able to keep this persona or keep this relationship that everyone has told them, you have to keep your marriage together. You have to do that no matter what. And next thing you know, people are just losing their mind because this relationship that they really wanted badly is falling apart, and they don't know
Mm-hmm.
how to cope with it. They don't know how to deal with the emotions that they're dealing with, knowing that their spouse, who is fit to be tired and tired of being abused, is leaving.
Mm-hmm. You want to know what? I have to talk about the church. I love church. I love church. And so I'm invested in church, but that also means that I see what I see. And baby,
Yes,
getting divorced in the church, ooh wee.
it's a
You
it,
want to be uh shunned, baby, you can get shunned for real.
right. Oh yeah, and people always want to quote that scripture and say, God hates divorce. God hates divorce, but guess what?
Hmm.
He also hates violence. If the people would
Yes.
read Malachi, the Malachi chapter, just read the whole book of Malachi. Malachi chapter 3, it talks about how men are not supposed to be treacherous. That means evil, vindictive, just
Hmm.
evil towards their spouse, because it brings violence. It brings violence to your home. So you're not supposed to treat your spouse some any kind of way. That is not God's design for his daughters to be treated like they're nothing or they're not important. No, like it
It's too
literally
many
says
men in the pulpit for that to be preached now on a regular
okay,
basis.
it literally says in the Bible that the abusers, their prayers will be hindered. God ain't even listening to you because of the way you treat your wife. Like no
Mm-hmm.
one wants to talk about that. They don't ever want to read that part. They want to go to God hates us. Yes, he does, but he also hates it when his daughters get treated like crap. That is not the design. That is not the design.
And so we really have to lift one another up in the church. And I'm talking men and women. Men, I'm holding you accountable right along with us women because we need support. We have to break this toxic culture within the church where you stay no matter what.
That is so true. It's not okay. And one thing, that's why I go to a church where they say it over the pulpit, if you're in an abusive relationship, leave. They'll say it multiple times, like leave. This is not healthy, and this ain't God.
Well, do they
Leave.
talk about that for all abuse? Because I'm going to tell you, those narcissists, that psychological abuse, ooh, they be bobbing and weaving. They have the people in the church thinking something wrong with you.
Oh yeah, they real good liars. Oh yeah, they can
Yeah.
be the best lawyers. They can say and sell everything. Okay, they can sell milk to a cow. Yes, they can say whatever is needed to be said to make you feel like something's wrong with you. When in actuality, you're actually standing by saying, "Do y'all see this? He's literally lying. Did y'all see the bruises? Did y'all see how he tried to take the money?" I'm like, people, it's hard to figure out a way to get your words together when it comes to someone who's narcissistic, because they've already mapped out what they're gonna say. They've been practicing, like they can sell it. They really do sell it. So we definitely need the men to continue to speak up and say something. It is not okay for people to be treated like this. It's not, and it's outrageous that to this day, I mean, like the agency I work for, we've been around for over 40 years. And the fact that we're still having to do this work in today's age, where there's so many powerhouse women in this world, it makes no sense for people that still have to run for their life, leave their home, leave their stuff behind, and come into a shelter, all because our society is set up to where abusers can get away with way too many things than they should be able to. So yeah, we need the support of men and leaders in this world who can help us, get to that place where this is like like this is unheard of. I look forward to the day where abusive relationships is unheard of. Like what? Who does
So
that?
we don't do that no more. That is so
That's like talking about slavery. Like, oh, what? You still get
exactly.
that?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay, that's what I'm looking forward to, that day where we get to that place. But everyone who's in a leadership or authority, power, men as well, to push that agenda forward, because this should not still be happening at all.
So it shouldn't. So we've gotten three under our belt. We talked about traditional abuse, where like a man is beating a woman. We talked about it's not there is a provocative nature, a toxic nature within the relationship. Maybe one person is verbally abusive and another person responds physically. Okay, so we kind of talked about that. And then we also talked about where we just, we throwing them blows, right?
Right.
Okay. But everybody fighting. I'm fighting you, you fighting me. We're doing it together. I want to talk about, I cannot let you get out of here without talking about how sometimes women, we're not innocent.
No, we're
Women
not. We're
abuse
not.
men, you know, you know, those some really, really master manipulative and abusive women are up here doing some wild stuff.
Oh, that's very true. That's very true. Like this, I think over the past couple of years, we started housing men in our shelter who were in abusive relationships with another woman, and it's real. Like you will have women who, yeah, they may not be able to go toe to toe and knocking him out, but they know how to pick up a frying pan, or they know how to manipulate situations where he can't even touch the money at all. Not that he can't count anything, but they're controlling. And they're texting him 50 times in the day, or they're calling him every moment. Where are you at? What's going on? This is not healthy either. And it's like, even with our young men, we have to educate them about love. It does not mean that this person is controlling everything that you do, what you wear, where you go, and who you're talking. It goes both ways. So women as well can be just as abusive as men. They may not leave the same kind of bruises, but the belittling and telling them they ain't gonna be nothing, or telling we've had male survivors tell us how she would call the police just because if he even looked at her funny, she'd call the police and tell them a lie or say something like, "Oh, he was threatening me, and she's tiny, and he may be this big dude, so the police ain't gonna believe that this little woman over here is trying to do something to this guy who's 6'3". Like, no, they don't believe that. And then there's a lot of men who won't even call us, won't even reach out to DV, domestic violence agencies, or call the police because the police are gonna laugh at them. Like, she's
Exactly.
doing what to you?
And that's not cute. None of that
No,
is cute.
it's
Um,
not.
uh, Shannon is bringing up covert narcissists, is particularly found in women. As a matter of fact, you just described a perfect situation. You got this, five foot, 102 pound woman, and she is calling the police on 6'2" man, and he's scared. He doesn't want to go to jail. He
He don't want
doesn't
to go
want
to
to go to
jail.
jail.
That's right.
Mhm.
And he'll do whatever it takes just to not have her call the police because of what may have happened last time when she did that. When the
Mhm.
police may have shown up and laughed at him or said, "Dude, what's going on here? What's happening?" And then you have it to where there's no support there, or they're scared that they may not be able to access the kids, because that's always all abusers always try to use the kids.
Mm.
You'll never see your son again. I will take him and and we will leave you forever if you ever try to do X, Y, and Z. So it's like, even when it
That's
comes to men,
abuse.
yeah, that's abuse. Exactly. That is absolute abuse. And so even with the men, they will try to compromise. They'll try to
Mhm.
adapt to this environment that is abusive the same way women do. But it's like with men, it's so hard for them to find the resources that they need to get that kind of help. And so there are agencies out there that provide domestic violence counseling, but there aren't a
Mhm.
lot of shelters or help for men with children, if they have children, or men in general. Like
Wow.
our shelter, we've been in business for over 40 years, and we just started allowing men to come into our shelters 3 years ago.
Mhm.
And there's
Mhm.
still like a handful of us in the state where I'm at who do that work. So there's not a lot of resources per se out there for them if they are trying to find somewhere safe to go and they
Mhm.
can't go to their own family, or they don't have the means to pay for it themselves. It takes a lot. There's not a lot of resources for men out there who are in abusive relationships, and I think they know that, which is why some of them stay longer than they should stay in those relationships, because and it becomes really toxic to where this firecracker woman is she tearing them down with every word, every day, to the point where he don't even
Mhm.
believe in himself anymore. Because I mean, you can have a real sharp tongue all day. I keep telling folks, like, there's a statement that says, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt. That's a lie. Words hurt, and they will stick with
Words
you
hurt and
longer.
words kill. Words
Yeah, they
hurt
do.
and kill.
Yeah, they do. And so
Mhm.
it's sad, but there's a need for more services for men. Hopefully we can end domestic violence so that we don't have to continue to do this kind of work. But sadly, there's not a lot of resources for male survivors as there should be.
Wow. Wow. So how can they reach you? How can the family keep in contact with you and get more information about the help that you're giving?
Well, for our agency down in Georgia, we have a crisis line that's 24/7, and they can call us at
Mhm.
404-873-1766. And then again, I'll say it again, it's 404-873-1766. But if you're out of this state and you're in another state, there's always the National Domestic Violence Hotline, where they can call at 1-800-799-7233. Again, that number is 1-800-799-7233. The National Domestic Violence Hotline will connect you with resources within your own community for survivors, for abusers. There's a variety pack of resources that are across the states. So no matter where you're at, the National Domestic Violence Hotline can help you.
Oh my goodness. Katha, I am so thankful for you spending this time with us and really, just being real and unpacking these types of situations, because people feel like they're alone.
They do. They really do. And it's you're not alone. There's resources out there. You do not have to live like this. This is not living. And I know there's people out there that have this hope. They really hope and want this relationship to work. But I'm telling you, there's a small, very small percentage of abusive relationships that last. It's very, very small. They either are continuously abusive or someone's ended up dead somewhere or in jail. So I encourage people to get if you can get out. Please seek help
Mm-hmm.
and get out.
Mm-hmm. You know what? My final words are really going to be this. Let's be brave enough not to live tortured.
Mm. Oof. Those some true
Wow.
words. Hmm.
Thank you, family, for spending time with us. You know what? We love to go deep here. So thank you for going deep with us. Have a good night.